All right, Adventure Spirers, I am continuing on with my series about getting out there. Oftentimes, I visit a lot of the online forums for women-focused travelers, and one of the questions that without a doubt is always there is, where should I go if I want to travel for the first time, and how do you do it if you're afraid? So I want to cover both of those premises, but the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about where do you go, which is a big part of feeling a lot more at ease about taking a first trip or your first few trips. And where do you go, right? So sky's the limit. There's so much to do, so many places to see, but there's limited time. So oftentimes, my first question to myself is, what am I feeling at this moment? What do I want to see? What do I kind of want to experience? You might decide you just want a restful kind of meditative experience, or you want the complete opposite. You want to be entertained. You want to, club it. You want to experience what the Hollywood crowd experiences. You really want the nightlife and the fanfare. Or you want something in the middle. You want to do some beaches. You might want a little culture. Ask yourself internally, what is it that I feel like I am craving at this time? And I think that helps to narrow down this wonderful wide world that we have available to us. Some people aren't looking for international travel. They're looking for domestic travel. So the same is true. Like, what are you wanting to experience? And dial in and get that kind of intelligence for yourself. Once you dial in, then I think you also need to figure out, are you doing this by yourself? And that might be informed by the first question. Are you doing it with a group? Are you meeting friends there? Are you mixing it up? Are you doing a little bit of both? Once you figure that out, that gives you more data points as to what kind of trip you're actually signing up for. After that, you're figuring out, okay, what's the country that kind of helps to meet these needs, right? I would say I'm just going to offer a few points of recommendations for folks who are doing it for the first time. If you have a high level of apprehension, but you definitely want to do it, I say to pick a U.S. city that you haven't visited and visit it alone. Visit it by yourself if you want to kind of increase your muscle for solo travel. There's some great cities that we have around us that are worth traveling to, that offer some great things. So I'm thinking of Washington, D.C. Philadelphia is also great. New York, of course, is a top one. It's a little bit more, and so if you haven't been to New York, a smaller city might be a better way to start. But if you feel like you're ready for it, New York, hands down, nothing like it, right? In addition to that, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philly, and Chicago have similarities in terms of size and your ability to navigate the cities. And then New York feels like it's just kind of its own. It's off to the side, its own thing, and a little bit more on a larger scale. But that's what I would recommend if you are trying to do a city that you have not done. I should also add Miami. Miami could be another city that offers a very different flavor as you think about Florida, but it has the markings of a city, it has culture, it has entertainment, nightlife, and a little glitz. You never know who you'll see in the Miami scene as well. So I would add that to the list. On the other side, if you want to go international, the big question that I usually say to folks is, how much of a language situation do you want to deal with? If you want to just kind of make it like, I just want to do it with a little more ease, I would say go to an English-speaking country. And if you're going to an English-speaking country, there's a lot of options. There are countries that purely are English-speaking countries, and then there are countries that have a high predominance of English-speaking people. Either are options. What comes to mind for me is, again, if you have a level of some trepidation or you haven't done it before and you want to stay closer to home, makes you feel more comfortable, which nothing wrong with that. I'm very big about figuring out what your trigger points are or the things that concern you the most. And if you address them, then the fear subsides. Let's say you want to stay closer to home for your first trip, but you want to go international. I think Mexico is a great opportunity, as well as Canada. For Mexico, if you want more beach, then obviously you can do, there's a handful of places that people tend to go. And then if you want to find more culture and you want more of a metropolitan area, then definitely Mexico City is where you should head. And I've heard great things. I have not been to Mexico City, but I've done quite a bit of Mexico. The other thing, Canada. Canada has a lot of options for you. You can go from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Vancouver to Montreal. Montreal is beautiful. It feels like you're in France. You would encounter some language barriers, but they speak English, so you could also do that. And it's not far from home. And of course, in terms of getting there, you're there in a couple of hours, right? If you want to just kind of take the plunge and go a little further than that, I would say London is a great opportunity. It's got a great transportation network. Things may be a little bit more spread out, but you can definitely get the transportation network is great. And because you're speaking English, you have a lot less complexity if you're going to London. It's a great city, a lot to offer as well. And the other place that I would mention that I've just recently returned from is Ireland. Ireland is kind of like a budding economy, if you will. People are moving from other parts of Europe to Ireland because it's a little less expensive, but it has some of the dynamics of every other major, metropolitan European country. You may not think of it quickly, but it's a beautiful country. The people are very spirited and are great at expressing and sharing their history, which is quite dynamic. And there's a lot to see and do. They have both, the city, and they also have more of a coastline and a countryside, which London offers as well, or I should say England offers as well if you want to get outside of the city. I want to get outside of London. So I would consider those areas first. Of course, if you want to delve into more language, but still has a high prevalence of English speakers, obviously there's a lot of European countries, and one of the first ones on my list would probably be France. In all of these places that have a language dynamic, I would encourage you to know at least the bare basics. The salutations can be just all you learn. I think people are always willing to help you if you try, and so I always try to get at least the salutation down. I don't always get it down, but I try it. If I need to use it as my entrance, I definitely do, and I think it shows a level of respect, and so I always encourage people to do that. So those are my recommendations for places to go. Other considerations when you're thinking about where to go. Based on where we are with COVID, you need to, of course, understand what are the limitations, what could happen if I get COVID in the country, and what is required of the US once I get back. Things have changed. Now the US is open. You don't have to go through the COVID testing, but everything is subject to change. So I would say just be aware of what the current guidelines are before you go and pick any particular country. The other thing I think, which all of us are experiencing some level of political unrest, honestly, and so there's a lot of countries that have a lot of unrest, which I think causes stress on those who might become tourists in those countries, right? You become more susceptible to crime when things aren't stable in the country. So figure out where's the best places to go. Everywhere's got something going on, and honestly, living in the States these days, if you are able to live in a city safely, you can handle yourself probably in any other major metropolitan area, in any other major country. So I would say take that confidence with you and be sensible. Don't do what you wouldn't do at home in a place that you have less knowledge about. The other thing, in other countries where the economics, the inflation rates are high, really, really high again, I think it's another stressor on the tourists in terms of plight of the locals. And so you have to just be mindful. The other end of that is that the dollar the exchange rates may be positive for us to go to another country. So I think you just have to weigh these types of conditions when you're thinking about where you want to go, and just being mindful. You ask yourself the question, you get the answers, and then it becomes something that you've considered. And I think it really helps to bring down the levels of stress that you might feel because some of these things are considered and answered. Now it's in the forefront of your mind and it's not something that you haven't considered. The other thing I think about when I'm traveling is my luggage. I think about that really early on. I'm a minimalist, and I recommend, just a carry-on and a carry-on bag. And if you can make that a part of your habit and your practice, I think it makes travel a whole lot easier. As we know these days, airports are finding that they're losing luggage, they're overwhelmed, staff is not available. Make it easy on yourself and keep what you need on you at all times is what I say. That I think will give you some reassurance as you take your first trip. So please share with everybody in the comments where you're thinking of going. What might be your biggest hurdle to getting out there if you're not out there, if you haven't gotten out there, and if you have gotten out there, where have you been? I'd love to hear a little bit about your travels. All right, until next time. Bye.
Essay.